For most of my life, I've prided myself on being a sharp judge of character. I've always been the guy who could read a room, sniff out a lie, and call someone's bluff without breaking a sweat. That's why it felt like a punch to the gut when the first cracks began to show in my marriage to Emily. We'd been married 6 years. It wasn't the kind of love story you write movies about, but it was steady, dependable. Or at least, that's what I thought. Looking back, the signs were there, but at the time, I dismissed them as quirks, bumps in the road, nothing to lose sleep over. I didn't know I was watching my marriage unravel, thread by thread. It started when Emily took up running. For years, she joked that the only marathons she'd ever participate in were Netflix binges, so it surprised me when she started waking up at 5:30 a.m. to jog. I supported it, of course. How could I not? It's great that you're focusing on your health, I told her one morning as she laced up her neon pink sneakers. She gave me a tight-lipped smile and mumbled something about needing to clear her head. But her runs became more than just exercise. She started staying out longer, saying she discovered a runners group that met at the park on Saturday mornings. Once, I decided to surprise her by showing up with coffee and donuts. When I got there, I found the park practically deserted. I brushed it off. Maybe I'd gotten the location wrong. But when I asked her about it later, she got defensive. "Why are you keeping tabs on me?" she snapped. "Can't I have one thing that's just mine?" Then there was the perfume. Emily had always worn the same scent, light and floral, something she picked out back when we first started dating. But suddenly, she switched to something bolder, muskier. "It's just a sample I got at work," she said when I commented on it. "Don't make it a thing." Around the same time, she became obsessed with her appearance. She spent hours in front of the mirror, perfecting her hair and makeup, even when we weren't going anywhere special. And her wardrobe? Out went the comfortable sweaters and jeans, replaced by form-fitting dresses and heels that hadn't seen the light of day in years. One night, we had dinner plans with friends, and I jokingly said, "Wow, you look like you're going to a gala, not Italian night at Tony's." She shot me a look that could have frozen fire. "What's that supposed to mean?" she snapped. Her phone became another point of contention. Emily had never been glued to technology. She'd always rolled her eyes at people who couldn't go 5 minutes without checking their screens. But now, her phone might as well have been surgically attached to her hand. It pinged constantly, and every time it did, she'd pick it up with a sly smile, turning away as she typed. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. "It's just work stuff," she said. But when I asked for details, she clammed up. "You wouldn't understand," she added, like I was too dense to comprehend her job. Then came the weird excuses. Once, she claimed she was stuck late at the office because of a system crash, but when I tried calling her desk phone, it went straight to voicemail. Another time, she told me she had to attend a team-building dinner but couldn't remember what restaurant it had been when I asked her about it later. The most bizarre moment came when I found a receipt from a jewelry store tucked under a stack of mail. It wasn't for anything crazy, just a modest gold bracelet, but I knew I hadn't bought it for her. "Oh, that," she said when I brought it up. "It's a gift for my friend Jessica. She just got promoted." I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right. The cherry on top was the night I walked into our home office and caught her on a video call. The screen went dark the second I stepped in. "Who was that?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Just Lisa," she said, too quickly. Lisa was her best friend. Sure, but they never video called. Lisa wasn't exactly the tech-savvy type. All these little things piled up, and the weight of them was starting to crush me. I felt like I was being gaslit in my own home. The Emily I knew would have laughed off my suspicions and called me out for being ridiculous. But this Emily? She was a stranger, guarded and evasive. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I wanted to trust her. So I turned to the one person I thought I could rely on for advice. My best friend, Mike. Mike and I had been inseparable since college. He was the guy who always had my back, whether it was helping me cram for exams or dragging me out of a bar fight. If anyone could help me make sense of what was happening, it was him. "Something's off with Emily," I told him one night over beers. "She's acting different, secretive. I don't know if it's work stress or something else." Mike's face clouded over, and for a second, I thought he looked guilty. But then he shrugged and said, "You're probably just overthinking it." Emily's not the type to mess around. Maybe she's planning a surprise or something. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But that gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. The truth hit me like a sucker punch I never saw coming. It was a random Tuesday evening, a night I had no reason to expect anything out of the ordinary. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through sports highlights on my phone, when there was a knock at the door. Standing there was Mike. But this wasn't the Mike I knew, the laid-back, confident guy who could defuse any tension with a quick joke. This Mike looked like he hadn't slept in days. His face was pale, and his hands fidgeted nervously at his sides. "What's up, man?" I asked, trying to keep it casual, though his expression set off alarm bells in my head. "We need to talk," he said, his voice shaky. I stepped aside to let him in, my chest tightening. He avoided eye contact as he walked into the living room, pacing like a trapped animal. "Mike, what's going on?" I pressed, my patience thinning. He stopped and finally looked at me. His eyes were filled with guilt, and before he even opened his mouth, I knew I wasn't going to like what he had to say. "Ben," he began, his voice breaking slightly, "I need to tell you something. I can't keep it in anymore. It's killing me." My mind raced, searching for what he could possibly mean. Did he wreck my truck? Screw me over at work? Whatever it was, I wasn't prepared for what came next. "It's about Emily," he said, and my stomach dropped. She and we've been seeing each other. For a second, I thought he was joking. My brain refused to process the words. But the look on his face told me he wasn't kidding. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice low but laced with anger. "It started a few months ago," he said, his words spilling out like he'd been rehearsing them. "One night, after you and I had that fight about her working late, she called me. She said she needed someone to talk to. One thing led to another." I didn't let him finish. "Shut up," I snapped, standing up so fast my chair screeched against the floor. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You're supposed to be my best friend." He flinched at my words but didn't back down. "I know, Ben. I know I screwed up. I can't even look at myself in the mirror anymore. That's why I'm here. I had to tell you. You deserve to know." "Deserve to know?" I barked, my voice rising. "What, so you can sleep better at night? So you can dump your guilt on me and feel like the bigger man?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the floor like a scolded child. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, the urge to hit him boiling up inside me. But I didn't. The only reason I didn't knock him out then and there was because of the history between us. This wasn't just some guy I'd met at the gym or a casual drinking buddy. Mike was the guy who'd been there for me in ways no one else ever had. When I was 23 and got into a bar fight I had no business being in, Mike had pulled me out before I would be beaten half to death. Another time, when my truck broke down in the middle of desert, he showed up at midnight with a tow truck and a thermos of coffee. He'd been my best man at my wedding, for God's sake. And now, he'd ripped my world apart. "You need to leave," I said through gritted teeth, my voice barely above a whisper. "Ben, please. Get out," I roared, pointing to the door. Mike hesitated, like he thought he could fix this somehow, but then he nodded and left without another word. The moment the door closed, I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. Emily came home an hour later. I didn't even give her time to settle in. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked, my voice cold and flat. She froze, her keys still in her hand. "What are you talking about?" "I talked to Mike," I said. "I know everything." Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly, switching to defense mode. "Mike's lying," she said, shaking her head. "He's trying to mess with you. You can't seriously believe him." "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily," I said, standing up to face her. "I want the truth, and I want it now." She tried every tactic in the book. First, she denied it outright, calling Mike a liar and accusing me of being paranoid. When that didn't work, she got angry, shouting about how I was always suspicious and never appreciated her. Finally, when it was clear she couldn't talk her way out of it, she broke down into tears. "It just happened," she sobbed. "I was lonely, and Mike was there for me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at her, my stomach churning. You didn't mean for it to go this far? You think that makes it better? You cheated on me, with my best friend. That's not a mistake, Emily. That's a choice. She begged for forgiveness, swore she'd end it, promised to do whatever it took to fix things. But I couldn't even look at her. The woman I thought I knew was a stranger now. That night, I slept in the guest room. Or at least, I tried to. Sleep didn't come easy with the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. The day after Emily's confession felt like walking through a minefield. I barely spoke to her, afraid that if I opened my mouth, I'd explode with anger I couldn't control. She tried to talk to me in the morning, following me around the house with red-rimmed eyes and apologies spilling from her lips. But I wasn't ready to hear her excuses again. By the afternoon, I couldn't take the tension anymore. I sat her down at the dining table, staring at her like I was trying to read her soul. I need to know everything, I said, my tone icy. No lies, no sugarcoating, just the truth. Her hands trembled as she held her coffee cup, and she couldn't quite meet my gaze. It started when we had that big fight about work, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I felt like you didn't care about me anymore. I was hurt, and Mike, he was just there. Stop, I said, cutting her off. Don't try to blame this on me. I wasn't the one sneaking around behind your back. She flinched but pressed on, detailing how their friendship had crossed the line after a drunken night out. She swore it wasn't planned, swore she didn't mean to hurt me, but every word felt like a dagger to my chest. And how long has this been going on? I asked, my voice barely masking the fury boiling beneath the surface. A few months, she admitted, her voice cracking. Months, I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. So every time you told me you were at work, or with the girls, you were with him. She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any confession. As much as I wanted to scream at her, to break something, I forced myself to stay composed. I couldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Later that evening, I sent Mike a text. It was short and to the point. I don't want to see you again. Stay away from my house, and stay away from Emily. He didn't reply, and honestly, I didn't care if he ever did. Emily tried to talk to me again that night, swearing up and down that she'd end it with Mike, that she'd do whatever it took to rebuild our marriage. I'll go to therapy, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'll quit my job if I have to. Just don't give up on us. But I didn't have the strength to respond. I grabbed a blanket and pillow and headed for the guest room. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I realized something. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a wake-up call. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with had made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. The days that followed felt like wading through quicksand. Every morning, I woke up hoping that the gut-wrenching pain would ease, but it didn't. Instead, it sat in my chest, a heavy reminder of how much I'd lost. Emily's betrayal wasn't just a crack in our marriage. It shattered the foundation of everything I thought I could rely on. I started avoiding her entirely. We existed in the same house, but it felt like we were worlds apart. She'd try to talk to me, her voice soft and pleading, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was the image of her and Mike together, laughing at some inside joke while I was at home, oblivious. Work became my escape. I threw myself into every project, volunteering for overtime, taking on tasks that no one else wanted. Anything to keep my mind occupied. But even there, the betrayal followed me like a shadow. Every small interaction with colleagues felt strained. Every moment of quiet was filled with intrusive thoughts I couldn't silence. At night, it was worse. The house, once a place of comfort, became suffocating. I couldn't sit in the living room without remembering the countless nights Emily and I spent curled up on the couch, watching movies or planning our future. The kitchen was no better. A place where we used to laugh while cooking together now felt cold and empty. The hardest part, though, was the bed. I couldn't sleep there, knowing it had been a part of a life that now felt like a lie. The guest room became my refuge, but even that wasn't enough to keep the nightmares at bay. One night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures of Emily and me during better times. Our honeymoon in Maui, her goofy grin as she tried to learn how to surf, her smiling face at our first Christmas in the house, wearing that ugly sweater she insisted on buying. I should have deleted them, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I stared at them until my chest ached, wondering how the woman in those pictures became a stranger. But as much as I hurt, I refused to let it break me. Anger began to take root, pushing out the despair. I wasn't the type to wallow. If Emily and Mike thought they could destroy me, they had another thing coming. I started going to the gym religiously. At first, it was just to burn off the restless energy, but it quickly became something more. Every time I pushed through a set of weights or pounded the treadmill, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I drifted away from during the years I spent focusing on my marriage. They didn't ask too many questions, for which I was grateful. Instead, they pulled me out of the house, dragging me to bars, poker nights, and weekend hikes. Slowly, I began to feel a glimmer of life returning to me. But the anger didn't fade. It sharpened. Every time I saw Emily, I felt it bubbling just beneath the surface. She'd been walking on eggshells around me, but I knew she was waiting for a chance to try and salvage things. That chance came one evening when she cornered me in the kitchen. "Ben," she said, her voice trembling, "we can't keep living like this. Please, let's talk." I set my coffee cup down and met her gaze. "Talk about what?" I asked, my voice flat. "About us," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. I want to fix this. I'll do anything." "Anything?" I repeated, my anger slipping through despite my best efforts to stay composed. "Do you even hear yourself, Emily? You didn't just mess up. You destroyed everything we built together. You betrayed me, with my best friend, no less. How do you expect me to come back from that?" She broke down sobbing, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. Her tears felt manipulative, like they were meant to guilt me into forgiving her. "I was lonely," she cried. "I thought you didn't care about me anymore." "Don't you dare put this on me," I said, my voice rising. "I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. You made those choices, Emily. You." She reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "We're done," I said firmly. "You can cry all you want, but it won't change what you did. I'm not going to be your backup plan." Her sobs followed me as I walked out of the room, but I didn't look back. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Emily's betrayal define me, but I wasn't going to let it go unanswered either. She and Mike had made their choices, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. Revenge wasn't about destroying their lives. It was about reclaiming mine. I spent days thinking about how to handle the fallout. Emily had betrayed me in the worst way possible, but Mike's role in this disaster couldn't be ignored either. The two people I trusted most had gutted me. I knew I couldn't just walk away quietly, but I wasn't about to stoop to some cliché revenge fantasy either. No, what I needed was a plan. One that would leave both of them with no doubt about the consequences of their choices. The first step was securing my assets. Emily and I shared a joint bank account, one that held most of our savings. The house was in my name, but I knew if she got wind of my plans, she'd try to claim her piece of everything. So I met with a lawyer. "Infidelity changes the game," my lawyer, Kelly, explained as she shuffled through paperwork. "If you can prove she cheated, we can argue for a more favorable settlement in the divorce. Do you have evidence?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts I'd taken screenshots of, the ones between Emily and Mike, their flirtation, their inside jokes, and, worst of all, the details of their secret meetups. Kelly nodded approvingly. "This is good. The more evidence we have, the better. Let's make sure you keep control of the finances." Within days, I'd moved most of the money into a new account under my name. Emily never noticed. She was too busy walking on eggshells, trying to find ways to win me back. Meanwhile, Kelly drafted divorce papers, which I planned to serve her at just the right moment. The next step was dealing with Mike. While I didn't want to ruin him completely, those past debts I owed him still lingered in my mind. I couldn't let him walk away unscathed. I started with something small, reaching out to a few mutual friends and casually dropping hints about his betrayal. I didn't have to say much. Once the truth started trickling out, It spread like wildfire. Mike prided himself on his image. He was the guy everyone liked, the one people trusted. But when word got around that he'd slept with his best friend's wife, that image crumbled. Friends started distancing themselves from him. He lost a couple of key clients at work, and his reputation took a hit he wouldn't recover from easily. Meanwhile, Emily was unraveling. She knew I was avoiding her, but she didn't know why. One evening, she cornered me again, tears streaming down her face. "Ben, I'm begging you," she sobbed. "Please, let's work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything you want." I stared at her, my expression unreadable. "Anything I want?" I asked, my voice calm. "Yes," she said eagerly, reaching for my hand. "Good," I said, pulling my hand away. "Then sign these." I dropped the divorce papers on the table in front of her. The color drained from her face as she picked them up, her hands shaking. "Ben, no. You don't mean this." "I mean every word," I said. "You didn't think about us when you were sneaking around with Mike. Why should I fight to save something you destroyed?" She begged and pleaded, but I didn't budge. The papers were airtight, thanks to Kelly's expertise. Emily would get nothing but her personal belongings. The house, the savings, everything else stayed with me. When I finally served Mike with a notice that he was barred from stepping foot on my property again, he called me, furious. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "We made a mistake, Ben. You don't have to scorch the earth over it." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "You slept with my wife, Mike. That's not a mistake. It's a betrayal. Stay the hell away from me." I hung up before he could say another word. Over the next few weeks, I started piecing my life back together. Emily moved out, taking her sob story with her. Mike disappeared from my social circle entirely. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But I wasn't done yet. My last move was small but satisfying. Emily had been bragging to her friends about her newfound fitness routine, so I reached out to her gym and casually mentioned the affair to her trainer. It didn't take long for the gossip to reach her new social circle, and I heard through the grapevine that she'd stopped going altogether, too humiliated to show her face. It wasn't about being petty. It was about making sure she understood the consequences of her actions. When everything was finally said and done, I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't need to scream or fight to get my revenge. I simply let their actions speak for themselves and ensured they faced the fallout. The dust settled faster than I expected. With the divorce finalized and Emily out of the house, a strange quiet filled the space she left behind. For the first time in weeks, I could walk through my home without feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing on my chest. At first, I didn't know what to do with the silence. The nights felt long, the stillness almost unnerving. But slowly, I started to rediscover myself. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls a new color, and took down every picture that reminded me of her. It was therapeutic, like wiping the slate clean. My friends rallied around me. The ones who'd kept their distance when Emily and Mike's drama exploded came back, pulling me into game nights and weekend trips. It was a reminder that not everyone in my life was a disappointment. As for Emily and Mike, they became ghosts. Mutual friends told me that Emily moved into a tiny apartment across town, far from the life we built together. Mike's reputation never recovered, and while he kept his job, he was no longer the golden boy of our friend group. I don't think they ended up together. Betrayal like that doesn't exactly create a solid foundation for love. But honestly, I didn't care. They were no longer my problem. Looking back, I realized the entire ordeal was more than just a betrayal. It was a lesson. It taught me the importance of setting boundaries and recognizing my own worth. It reminded me that forgiveness doesn't mean giving someone a free pass. Sometimes, it means letting go and moving on without them. Now, I've found my footing again. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, that feels good. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel